evening and welcome to another episode, of course, a mind-blowing edition, like it promises to be, of our live interactive forum called Addiction, Preventing Addiction, Overcoming Addiction. Okay, well, I know for some time now, this program has a little bit not really been on air, and a whole lot of you have been asking questions, what's happening, what is going on, what's happening. Well, we've actually been working behind the scenes, and you cannot really blame us because the pandemic was here, so we had a little break putting up things together. You know how it is, restrictions from different levels of government, from the federal to the state government levels, of people not being able to come together. But we thank God that the church prayed, the Christians prayed, we fasted. And of course, like the Bible says, that this one will not live except by prayer and fasting. And thank God that so far God has answered our prayers, and we are overcoming coronavirus. Like we are also going to learn how to overcome addiction today. Well, you know how it is. I would like to call him our August guest. So far, he's always been. We'll let you know who our guest for today is on the show. Well, if the guest has changed, we will let you know. So a lot of you now, for now, just like it's done in the Indian movies, want to keep you in suspense. We'll let you know who our guest for today is. If it's the same guest you've always known, or if it's another guest altogether. But my name is Itode Aaron. That has not changed. It still remains the same. We'll go on a short break right now, and then when we come back, I'll let you know who our guest for today is. But this is the program, Overcoming Addiction. It's a live interactive forum program for, of course, youths at different levels to be able to learn. It's one of the programs that has gained, a lot of recognitions on social media, because this is one program that teaches youths on how to tackle our everyday challenges as growing adults. You don't want to miss it. I'll let you in on the phone numbers where you can send in your messages as the show proceeds. If you have any questions, and of course, if you have contributions to the show, I'll give out the numbers as we proceed, and then you can be a part of the show. My name is Itode Aaron. Stay with us. I will be right back. The live interactive forum program here, which is being built to build and mold our youths as we go through our everyday challenges. When a person has become an adult, actually, when you've gotten to a certain stage of your life, you've passed through a whole lot of challenges already. So at that point, you just want to live through until you get to meet your maker. You will agree with me to a large extent that challenges meet youths the most. Yes, challenges get to meet youths the most, So, well, like I said earlier before we went on the show, today's topic on our show is overcoming addiction. Overcoming addiction. And if you want to be a part of the show as we proceed, all you have to do is send in your text messages, okay, to the numbers 0806 517 6461. 0806 517 rather 6461. I would also call out the numbers again as the show continues. But then let's get to our guest for today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, my beloved brethren in the Lord, I want you all to join me, if possible, in a standing ovation, a round of applause. Well, I may not be seeing you, but of course God is seeing you. As we welcome our guest for today, our dearly beloved father, a renowned servant of God, a seasoned a minister of the gospel. He is no other than the one and only dear father of ours who has always been our guest on this show, Pastor Isaac V. Oluri, who happens to be the international director of our dear, beloved, renowned, great ministry, Greater Evangelism World Crusade. Daddy, you're welcome to the program again.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure once again.
Yes. I must say that I miss you, Daddy. It was quite elating. That's why no matter what has happened, when I was told that the program is going to resume today and you are still the guest of the program, I had to make sure that I would be here, because it would be disappointing to God if for whatever reasons that I allow myself to be absent in the program. But of course, I'm sure it is disappointing to the devil now that despite all, I am still a part of the program today. So we give God the glory. So thank you so much, Daddy. I know how busy you can get, especially in a time like this, and you took out time out of a busy schedule to be a part of the program today. Okay, so Daddy, today we're actually talking about overcoming addiction. You know, like when we talk about addiction, most times people look at it in the drug aspect. You know, but addiction is in so many ways. Even pornographic videos can be a form of addiction. There are people who are addicted to pornographic videos. There are people who are addicted to idolatry. There are people who are addicted to hanging out, you know, to having friends and being in the company of friends instead of spending time, you know, to carry out those activities that makes their lives better. So Daddy, I know that you have quite a lot that you would like to, you know, expose to us today on the show. So we would like to hear more from you, Daddy.
Thank you very much. I want to once again appreciate you for being here, and for all those who are part of this program, I want to once again welcome you. For me, it's a pleasure to come back to you. I've always desired to have opportunity to share with you. Today we are dealing on a very crucial subject, overcoming addiction. And then just from the title, you will know that we are not talking about that there is no addiction. We are talking about how to overcome it. That means it's agreed that addiction is an issue. It's a contemporary issue that affects quite a number of people, both young and old. And it's an issue that we need to address, because particularly in this forum, we address contemporary issues, particularly that affects the youths. Now, talking about addiction is a very broad subject, but because of the time constraint, we will have an overview of addiction, and then look at how we can overcome addiction, particularly from the Christian point of view. Now, I will define addiction in a very simple way before I will look at some other detailed ways to explain it. Addiction is anything you take in or do that takes mastery of you. Anything you do or you take in that takes mastery of you, controls you, instead of you controlling the thing, it unconsciously and sometimes consciously controls you, then that is an addiction. So that means that when we talk about addiction, it's not only when you are taking something that is harmful to you, even things that are good, you can be addicted to it and then it will have some issues. So addiction is an urge to do something that is hard to control or stop. A person with an addiction does not have any control over what they are doing, using, or taking, because their brain chemistry changes as the addiction progresses. So the thing gets to a point where it affects their brain chemistry. So addiction is talking about dependence upon a substance or habit. It can be something physical. It can also be something psychological. So there is that dependence on either a substance or a habit. We're going to be seeing some of them as we go on. It is when a substance or activity, some of them may be activity, even work. Some people can be addicted to work, or behavior becomes the main focus of an individual's life, resulting in physical, mental, or social harm, either to themselves or to others. Then that is addiction. So in addiction, there is this aspect of, it indicates a psychoactive substance that crosses the barrier between the body and the brain temporarily to alter the brain's chemical balance. So those things you take that it alters. So it affects the brain and automatically your behavior. When you talk about issues that people popularly know as issues of addiction, like tobacco, alcohol, and some drugs. So we're talking about addiction. So there is that psychological dependence. Some areas like smartphone, Some people cannot do without their smartphone. They forget their smartphone is something wrong has happened. Addiction to sex, gambling, and some other ones that we're going to see as we go on. Now, one thing about addiction is that, when you're addicted to something, it causes some feelings. Part of those feelings are shame. Sometimes after doing them, it results to shame, it results to guilt, it leads to failure, despair, anxiety, hopelessness, and sometimes it will even lead you to humiliation because you do things that you are not proud of. Addiction also becomes a dependent on a substance or behavior. So you keep repeating the activities, from time to time, even when you know the negative consequences. It's harmful. It's just like, if you look at the advert for, alcohol or cigarettes, they will tell you this thing is harmful to your health. The producers, they put it as a label, as a condition, but you still go for it. And people keep going to it because something is now from their, from their taste for it, it has become an addiction. So in addiction, there are something they call 4 C's of addiction. There is that compulsive nature, there is that compulsion that you are no longer in control. That's when I gave the initial definition. I said, the thing you are doing or taking takes mastery of you. So there's that compulsive nature. I had a story of a young man who smokes, and he cannot sleep without smoking. And suddenly he couldn't get a cigarette to smoke, and he tried to sleep, he couldn't sleep. He got up around 1 a.m. looking for where to get cigarettes because he cannot smoke. He cannot sleep without smoking. So the second C of addiction is craving. So you see something inside you, craving for it. Another C of addiction is that addiction produces consequences. It produces consequences, and yet people continue with it, and then it controls. So those are the 4 C's of addiction. Now, the indication that someone has been addicted or there is an addiction is, like we have said, lack of control or inability to stay away from either a substance or behavior. They can't control, they can't stay away from a substance. It also sometimes leads to decreased socialization, like abandoning their commitments, because when they get involved in that thing, they can forget something else they're supposed to do. Ignoring relationships. Sometimes it affects relationships, either family relationship, husband and wife relationship. It's also ignoring risk, factors. Like those who are addicted to some drugs, they share needle without minding the risk factors and the consequences and potential consequences. So these are all, signs that addiction has set in. Now, what are some of the things that are set, addiction? How does addiction develop? Sometimes it's developed through peer groups. Some people learn how to take some substances, drink or whatever, through peer groups. It's also through physical and sexual abuse. Some people, when they were young, they were abused, and suddenly they developed a kind of feeling for those things, and then they can't do without it. Early exposure to drugs, all kinds of drugs. Stress can also cause addiction because of the stress. There is something you now do to take care of it. Parental guidance can greatly affect a person's likelihood of drugs use or addiction. So when parental guidance is failing, it can also affect addiction. Now, we also have some developmental genetics that also affect addiction. So the genetics and environmental factors. Like today, I grew up at a time that you can't easily access even where you can make a call. You have to travel a distance before you can make a call. But today, phones is everywhere. So an average child grows up with phones and all this ICT. So there is that likelihood, because of this environmental factor, for them to become, phone and ICT dependent with, because of their developmental stages. So we also have that environmental factors and genes that can play some role. Now, there are addiction can be classified broadly into 2. we can classify addiction broadly into two. We have the substance dependence or abuse addiction. So depending on substance, something you take in. There's also the one we call the behavioral addiction. Now I'm going to explain a little more because those are the issues we want to handle. So substance dependence includes depending on substances like alcohol, drugs like marijuana, that is, they call it weed and other names. There are other drugs that causes hallucination. You know, they call them hallucinants like PCB, LSD. These are drugs. People depend on them. There's even inhalants like pain thinners and glue. People inhale them because they feel it makes them high. It's even as bad as some people inhale, you know, septic tank. That is the remnants of septic tanks because it makes them high. So you find somebody going to feces that have decayed for several, you know, months to inhale it just because it gives a feeling of satisfaction or whatever. We also have the opioid painkillers. There are those painkillers that sometimes initially you started using them to treat a problem, to handle a pain, but you now get used to it that you can't do without it. Codeine, oxycodone, that is heroin, and all the rest of them. They're all in that category. We also have sedatives. That's why in many normal places, some of these things are not on the counter drugs. There are things that only doctors can prescribe, but with our system and even developed places, they always have a way of getting them. So sedatives and other medicine in that category that, you know, try to kind of ease anxiety and, you know, try to bring some kind of a tranquilizer to you. So cocaine, metomethicillin, and mycin, and some stimulants, tobacco. So all these ones are in the class of substance dependence or abuse, which we call substance addiction. So people with a substance use disorder have distorted thinking, particularly those who take drugs, alcohol. It affects them that they have distorted thinking, behavior, and body function. Changes in the brain's wiring are what cause people to have intense craving for the drug and make it hard for them to stop using it. So it becomes difficult to stop ordinarily. These substances can cause harmful changes in how the brain functions. These changes can last long after the immediate effect of the drug, like the intoxication. It will last longer even after you have taken the drug. So intoxication is the intense pleasure, calm, increased senses, or a high caused by the drug. You feel high. So the symptoms of this intoxication, they will differ from one person to the other and also from one substance to another. Over time, with the addiction, as it builds up, you begin to see that you will need a larger amount to feel the effect. Somebody started with taking 1 bottle or 2 bottles of alcohol. Before you know, you can take 6 bottles. You can finish a dozen before you feel the same thing. The same thing with drugs. That is how substance abuse works. Now, let me talk a little more on behavioral addiction. Now, these are addictions that are based on behavior. So there are so many. We may not be able to point out all of them, but any behavior that now makes you become dependent on it, controls you unconsciously, is a behavioral addiction. One of them is gambling. Internet use. Internet is a good technology, but it also has a form of addiction, sexual addiction, which you will see in form of either pornography, you know, lesbianism, and all the rest of them in that class. You know, gaming addiction, they are all under behavioral addiction. They begin the same way the drug, the drug addiction starts. So, or alcohol. So they along the line there is what they call neurotransmitters and other natural chemicals that will now flood the brain whenever an addiction-prone individual engages in these activities. So they crave and participate in the actions even when they know that it's unhealthy. So though it does not, one of the issue about behavioral addiction is that though it does not cause a physical dependence like substance abuse, because sometimes if somebody uses drugs, alcohol, and the rest of them, sometimes you can see the physical, effect clearly on the person. Sometimes they lose control and, cause a lot of harms. I know that a lot of immediately showed addiction hard to treat is that these activities are deemed acceptable in the society. Using phone is acceptable. Social media is acceptable. It's acceptable in the society. Watching television is acceptable in society. Even food. One can be addicted to food and a particular kind of food. It's acceptable to eat. That is one thing that makes behavioral addiction even more difficult to handle. And so many people are falling prey to behavioral addiction without knowing it. Now, I would now spend more time to talk about the behavioral addiction, because these other ones are like extremes. When you are drug abuse and the rest of them, there are, it looks like some of the extremes of addiction. Now, gambling addiction. This is when someone engages in compulsive betting. Today we have all kinds of, betting apps and games and centers. And you find people, sometimes students, I've had stories of students who use their school fees to go and bet. And when it is time for exams, they have not paid their school fees. Their parents have given them. It's a compulsive thing. And it always gives you hope that, I missed it this time, I will get it the next time. It has the same thing, in the past, they used to call it pool. It used to be some of the old people, they have papers, they used to mark, and they come every Friday, they will come and look at the board. Oh, it just caught one. But this time it has been, technology has come in. So you find people, this behavior, it brings adverse consequences because people lose money. Some people even sell their properties so that they can play with the hope that they will win. Some can even sell things that belong to people that are close to them. So it leads to gambling disorder. Then we have the smartphone technology has increased the exposure of the young people to gambling apps and gambling devices. So it becomes a problem. But for a Christian, I will just put this before we continue, that gambling is not wholesome, and a Christian is not expected to be engaged in gambling. The other one is sex addiction. Like we said, some of these things are normal things if they are done in the proper time. Like for a Christian, if you're married, sex is not a sin. It's only a sin when you are doing it outside marriage. Now, but there is also addiction to sex, a pattern of sexual impulses and behavior that causes distress or impairment in families. That's why you find some abuse. You find abuse. Some people who, abuse minors, rape cases have been on the increase because of this, sex addiction, social, occupational, and all the rest of them. So they affect, sex addiction. If there's that compulsive sexual behavior, you now find some people engage in masturbation, lesbianism, and other homosocial behaviors, and they don't have control over themselves. When the urge comes, they must look for a way to satisfy it. That's why some people defile minors. So technology has also led to increase in sexually compulsive behaviors, like dating apps. We have dating apps, they pop up on your phone, and you just go to sites that before you know, you are a kind of, you are arrested. You begin to go all over and over again. Pornography. You find people, they go into pornography sites, they come with consequences because they affect you, get addicted, and it comes with other consequences in your life. So they become compulsive. Even some married people, you find it even affects their relationship with their wives because of pornography. So this is, not only that pornography is sinful, it is an addiction. It's also, we now have the substance abuse can also lead to sexual addiction, because most people who get into some very high level of sexual addiction, they are also using substance. So they are like things partners in the same game. Then we have gaming addiction. This is also, we have technologies that of games playing that is on the rise. You find particularly young people, they can sit down before the game for hours without caring. Sometimes not even bothered about food. While playing games may not be wrong, but when you get addicted and it controls you, you can sit down, forget every other useful way you can use your time, and then begin to enter into gaming, then it is a problem. Video games of all kinds. So these are all under gaming addiction. Then we have the one we all classify under internet addiction. People who use the computer. You can be addicted to using the computer. They don't sleep, they're always in the computer. It takes a better part of them. They become obsessive. They check their email all the time. Every time. Social media, that is another one. Every time they're everywhere in the meeting, they are in the church, they're not concentrating, they're either tweeting or replying one social post or whatever. So they don't concentrate. So when it gets to a point where as you do as if you cannot do without these things, then addiction has come in. It has become compulsive, and that is not good for even online shopping. Because as soon as because of that addiction, before you know, they are shopping the things they need and what they don't need, and they keep spending money online. So that is under internet addiction. Then we have phone addiction. It should have all very close to internet addiction. That means you reach for your phone the moment you are bored, you are alone, you pick your phone. If for any reason you forget your phone, it will look like that day is a spoiled day. Then there is a problem. It means that the phone is now controlling you. Some people will wake up multiple times in the night to check their phone. If somebody has sent one message, one thing, for them to reply, there's a feeling of being anxious, upset if anything happens to your phone, or maybe there's a network issue. You think that the world is going to collapse. But there was particularly for those of us in my own generation, there was a time we lived without it. And that's one of the principles I use for myself today. Sometimes if I want to do something, I just keep the phone aside. I have lived without phone before. I can still live without it. Phone should not control me. Even people, they are praying, Christians, they are praying, their phone will ring. They will stop praying to go and answer phone before they come back to talk to God. That is how bad it has gone. So that is, it comes with consequences. Sometimes there is a withdrawal symptoms for smartphone addiction. You have restlessness, anger, irritability. Maybe you are in the office because you can't use your phone. You just become irritable, difficulty in concentrating, sleep problems, craving access to your smartphone or other devices. Now there are other behavioral addiction, like watching television. Some people can sit down and watch home video and all kinds of movies for hours. And you know that they say time is money. Time is part of your life. And sometimes you are watching entertainment that is paying other people, and you are losing your own, investing your own life. So we have that. I've already talked about shopping, compulsive. The one I talked about initially was internet, online shopping. But there is also shopping can also be an addiction. They have compulsive, anything they see, they want to buy. Anything they see, they want to buy. There is that compulsion to spend. Eating also, when you can't control your eating, it becomes comfort. You see some certain food you can't control yourself, then it's also an addiction. So we can keep going on and on. Quickly, let me look at characteristics of addiction. Generally, there is a number of characteristics. The individual cannot stop taking the substance or doing that thing. That is one. Number two, health problems. Due to not stopping the addiction, it comes with some health problems, particularly substance abuse, and then even the other psychological ones that affect your brain. You can't sleep well because you you have to wake up and all the rest of them to do those things. So we have those ones. So we also have giving up recreational and social activity because of those things. When you get engrossed, there's nothing else you remember. You have no time even for the family. Sometimes people are in the family, but they are engrossed with their phone. They don't communicate with their spouse. They don't communicate with their children. They're engrossed, tweeting and retweeting and all that, WhatsApping and the rest of them. So those are some are part of faith. Then faith, particularly those who are in, who use drugs. No matter how you try to block them, they have the just to sustain the addiction. That is the mystery of it. People will give them, you say, I have no money. They say, don't worry, because they want to keep you enslaved and keep their business going. It also, saving stashes. So addicted people will now tend to keep small stashes of their substance hidden away. So they will hide it away so that people will not know where they can find it. Risky behaviors, sometimes reckless driving because of people are high and the rest of them, and all other issues, trading on sex and all the rest of them, money, stealing money and the rest of them. Excessive consumption also follows. Dealing with issues. An addicted person often feels that they cannot deal with the problems without the drugs and all that. And so those addiction, obsession, secrecy and denial, they become secretive because they are not proud of what they are doing, but they cannot do without it. Having troubles with the law when you are doing those things that are illegal. So those are consequences. Financial problems, because each of these addictions are sponsored by, you need money to keep them going. Then relationship issues, they deteriorate because of this addiction. Now, how do we handle addiction? The first thing we must know that the Bible knows that issues of addictions are obvious. I will start with this scripture in Proverbs chapter 23. If you read verses 29 to 31, he said, who had woe? He was trying to describe one form of addiction. He said, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who had contentions? Who had babbling? So he's describing the things that follow the addiction. Who had wounds without cause? Who had redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine. They that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moves, it serves aright. And then he said, thy eyes will behold strange women. So he's talking about alcohol in this case, which some other drugs also have the same effect. He said, your eyes will behold strange women, and thy heart shall utter perverse things. When people get drunk, they say things that, they could not say under normal circumstances. He said, yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea. When people get drunk, they are lying on the road, lying in the gutter. They say the place is so cool. That is the effect of addiction. Or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. Look at me. I'm on top of the wall. They have stricken me, shall thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When I awake, I will see the body. But he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. That is how God sees it. So he says we should flee. Number 5 is fill the gap with positive habits. A gap has been created. If you want to quit addiction, you must fill the gap with positive habit. Look at what Ephesians 5:18 told us. He said, don't be drunk with wine, but be filled with what? The Holy Spirit. So if you are a Christian and you are still struggling with drinking, all you just need, seek for opportunity to be filled with what? The Holy Spirit. Then you will see that it will take away the addiction of drinking, because that gap will be filled. The Holy Spirit will begin to do things. When you read verse 19 and 20, you will see the things He will be moving you to do. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 8 to 10, it also tells you, put off. It tells you the things to put off. It's like you can switch up your light, you can put it on. It's under your control. Put off. Your television, you can put it off. You know, those who are in the entertainment industry, they will tell you, keep tuned, don't touch the dial. They shouldn't control you. They are doing their business. You should know when to on the dial and when to do what? Off the dial. So he said put off. And then he also said put on. So there has to be a putting off and there has to be what? A putting on. You can read it in Colossians 3 verses 8 to 10. In Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 6, it gives you another remedy that can fill the gap. It said, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy what? Might. Now, these are some of the parts that you yield to these addictions. Now, if your love of God fills those parts, then you will not have the challenge to begin to look for, things. People are looking for love, looking for something that will keep them high. Already, God has filled you. So, you also seek, number 6 is to seek God's help through prayer. Seek God's help through prayer. And, 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, there is no temptation, no trial, nothing taking you, but such as is common to what? Man. So whatever you are going through is not strange. Some people have gone through it and they have come out of it. But God is what? Faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted above that ye are what? Able. But with all the temptations, he can make a way of what? Escape. So if you are under addiction today of any kind, there is a way of escape. God is faithful. And finally he said, I say, seek counseling. In some of the cases you may need counseling. In some of the cases you may need prayer. You may not, all these other principles may not work. You need prayer because you need God. And some may have become a spiritual issue that the power of God needs to come in. And then you also need accountability. Somebody that should hold you accountable so that the tendency to go behind and go into those things will not be there. So these are some of the issues on dealing, how you can overcome.
Quite an exposing one. Welcome. Of course, I'm sure that a lot of us have actually been learning so much. For a moment, I just became sober because there are some of the things that Daddy was highlighting that possibly we have taken for granted or we thought it meant nothing, especially when it comes to phone addiction, and television addiction. You possibly may not even have an idea of how much these things are affecting your lives negatively until somebody begins to expose those things to you. We're gradually coming to the end of the show. So this is almost like the climax, the most interesting part of it, the interactive section of the show. You don't want to miss it. You have to stay put and, of course, see what we're having here. But don't forget that you can send in your messages in form of your questions or contributions to the numbers 0806 517 6461. 0806 517 6461. Send in your questions and of course your contributions to the show. Well, Daddy, while you were talking, quite a number of questions were coming in, and please, I would also like to plead that when you're sending your questions, as it is supposed to be, don't forget to send in your name and of course your location. Don't forget to include your name and your location. I know some of you want to be anonymous and all that, but it will help, Daddy to relate with you personally when he's trying to answer your questions. Okay, we have this first one that he would like to take. I feel I am guilty. I feel I'm getting addicted to tramadol. How do I overcome this? I started using it for medical purposes. So the person is saying that possibly had medical challenge and had to use tramadol, maybe by prescription or non-prescription, but it seems like the person is getting addicted to it. So he or she is asking, how to overcome the use of tramadol.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that some of the things I've explained earlier comes in. First of all, like I said, you must admit that it's a problem. Because one thing is that apart from the effects, every drug is a chemical and they come with the side effects. And your life is not meant to be dependent on that drug. That means that if you now have an issue that will require tramadol, the dosage you will need for it to work will become higher. So it has a lot of effects. Medical people will explain better. But just like I said, accept that it's a problem. Number 2, then you must exercise on discipline. there is always what they call withdrawal syndrome. When you try to withdraw, it will want to fight back. The brain will want to fight back as if you cannot do without it. But that is where you now know that God has given you power. It may give you some discomfort for a while, but with time, you discover that you can completely withdraw. You know, there are times that even that's why what happens to people with sleeping pill, you had a problem. They told you, okay, take this to sleep. And then you keep taking it and taking it. Before you know, you become dependent on that thing to sleep. Now, the next level is that when you are taking those decisions, if you are a Christian and you are a child of God, you pray, ask God for help. God can send help in anything, as simple as that. As you come to a point that you say, God, please help me, you know, God will send help. If it's something you need counseling, either medical counseling or spiritual counseling, you can also take. But it's something that you can take a decision, be disciplined, and there will be some initial discomfort, but after that, you are going to be normal. Because you were normal before it, so you can also be normal without it.
Yes, true. Okay, Daddy, we have another question here. This one says, sir, I really want to stop my pornographic addiction, but I find myself going back to it. I hate myself for doing this, and I have given up on being a believer. So the person is asking, how do I overcome my pornographic addiction?
Okay. Yeah, I want to appreciate your sincerity, but I trust that God will send help to you. Now, you don't need to give up being a believer, because, you know, just like I read for you, First Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, he said, there had no temptation taking you, such that is not common to what? Man. Any young man, you know, can be open to pornography, depending on the environment. But the issue is that control can be broken. And you decide, first of all, there are pornography sites. Some of the phones, because of your continual use, your phone has been infected by it. But I'm sure if you meet some of the people who are conversant with technology, they can flush it and then block it. And then, because it is your finger you use to click somewhere, you can tell yourself no. In fact, there is a bombardment. That's why the internet and phone, they are both positive. They also come with it with some negative reason. There's a bombardment. I remember, I can share an experience I had. I don't know what happened. My phone was infected, and I used to have a bank account. I won't tell you, a bank account, and as the bank app. And I saw a message with that same bank app. I didn't know that they just changed one letter or something. And when I opened it, it was a pornographic site. And as I saw it, I had to stop it immediately. So, the enemy will suddenly advance, but that discipline, God gave you the ability to be in control. When God created man, he said, you should subdue what? The earth. Now, subduing the earth is that you must start with subduing yourself, subduing your flesh. So don't give up on your faith. All you need to acknowledge that this thing is wrong. I'm sinning against God and against my body. So as you appreciate it and you sincerely go to God in prayer, help will come. And then you take the necessary discipline. Maybe once in a while you may fall prey, but as you come to yourself, you quickly get out of it. And so and then counseling will also be useful. That's why if you can reach you to have counseling with you, I talked about accountability. There are also going to be that accountability so that somebody knew that this is a problem. So there's a time for you to sit down and begin to talk over it. I'm sure that as you have that kind of accountability, gradually God will help you and grace will come to you and you overcome it.
Amen. Okay, Daddy, I know you've said something about this next question, but I don't know if you have something to add. It says, please, sir, is football betting a sin?
Yeah, now, for the Christian, all of them follow that gambling. Gambling is not wholesome. because it's something that somebody loses for somebody to do what? Gain.
Yeah.
So if I'm rejoicing that I have won today, so many thousands of people have what? Lost. And that is not a Christian way of making money. People should not be crying. I told you that because of gambling, some people have sold their property. Some people have used their school fees. So I should not be rejoicing. So that is even if I gain from it. And then it is a satanic way, or it holds people down. There is nobody who has gone into betting that comes out clean. It is the managers that gain. Because there is a tendency that if I just won today, I want to go back and bet more. So it is something that addicts you. So it is not healthy for a Christian. So I can clearly tell you that God will not approve gambling.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tavi. Well, we have this other question. Still no name, no location. It says, what if you have prayed, studied the word, and fasted, but the problem still persists? Possibly the problem of overcoming whatever addiction the person is going through. And so he or she is asking, what if you have prayed, you have studied the word, and you have even fasted, but the problem still persists? What then can you do?
Yeah, that's where counseling and prayer with, people that can be useful to you comes in. You have done what you can. Then you need counseling. There are a few questions they may ask you. Because we have said some certain things, if you want to quit an addiction, you must ensure that those things, you put them off. See how they are not around the environment. And other things. But counseling, prayer will help you, and accountability. If you have done your best, that's why you need. So it's not something to be ashamed of, because it's destroying you. It's destroying you. It's not only going to destroy you here, it's going to destroy you in eternity. Because if you are doing something that you are feeling guilty about, shameful about, it means that thing will cost you heaven. So why will not swallow the pride, meet somebody and share, and they will keep it. It's going to be confidential. For an average counselor, those things are held confidential. So avail yourself of counseling.
Okay. This is actually the much we can take on the show today. We would like to say thank you to all those who have been listening. But before we go, we'll just have to take this question that just came in shortly. Okay. I might just have to read it so that you will see it. It says, good evening, sir. Is it wrong to be addicted positively? Like they usually say that whatever has a good side has a bad side. So the person is asking now, since addiction seems to have a lot of negativities, is there a positive side to addiction? For example, studying, and this one is coming from Blessing David from Bundu Church. I'm sure Great Evangelism World Crusade Bundu Church. So Blessing David is asking, is it wrong now to be addicted positively? Is there a positive side to addiction, especially when it comes to studying? Though Blessing did not specify whether studying the Word of God or studying your books as a student.
Okay. Like when we talked about addiction, there are those ones that you look at them, they produce very easily negative results. There are those ones I said they are good things, yes, but over time you get addicted to it. Now, studying like work, now it comes with side effects. If you get addicted to work, you will not raise a good family, because work takes preeminence in your life. Now, the general issues about addiction is that the Bible does not wants you to be in control, not something to control you. The only thing the Bible permits to control you is the Holy Spirit. So, if anything else, because even the Bible even said that the spirit of the prophet is what? Subject to the prophet. That means that even when the spirit is controlling me, I can still say, oh, I have to pray till this time, I have to do this. If not, somebody will tell you there is a spirit upon me to pray, and you pray and then they miss work. They pray and miss exam.
Yes.
They say, I'm in the spirit. It does not, so God did not wire you that way. He gave you the free will. So while studying is good, spending time in studying is good, don't be so addicted, because when we're talking about addiction now, it is when it controls you. Something inside you is missing if you don't do it. So even though it is good, it will come with a side effect, because it will affect relationships. You can't have time for other things. You will use the time for another thing to do another and to do the other. And they say all work and no play makes what? Jack a dull. You can't be balanced. So no addiction in a quote and unquote cannot be a very positive thing. You should always have a way to being in control. That's why we said the behavioral ones, you know, they look good. So people don't know that you can create a problem.
Okay, well, that while you were saying, there was something that you said that just caught my attention. You mentioned the spirits of the prophet being subject to the prophet. You know,
Yes.
there are times you go to a church and they tell you that nobody should be in a hurry to leave. Today we are praying, we are singing, we are praising the Lord as the Spirit leads. I don't know how we describe that situation. Ordinarily, instead of maybe putting the service into check, like saying, okay, today we will do this and do this by 10 a.m. service is done, 11 a.m. service is done, or 12 noon. But they tell you as the Spirit leads. How do we describe that situation, Adi?
Yeah.
Is it a positive situation to say?
Yeah, I think that there is some balance we need to create.
Okay.
No, service to God is a spiritual thing.
Okay.
So ultimately, God is meant to control it. The Spirit of God is meant to control it. Now, if you have a meeting where you have enough time, the issue is that you prepare the minds of the people. You know, we are going to come to have a prayer meeting. So you can spend as much time as possible in God's presence.
Okay.
Now, if there are meetings that are also timed, now you discover that you need to respect the time. But there are some times that God will, because He is supreme, He will intervene. If I give you an example, when Zachariah and the husband of Elizabeth, the father of John the Baptist, he went into the temple. He delayed. It was not usual. He had a visitation.
Okay.
And that was what gave birth to John the Baptist. So sometimes, but some of the ones that we just say as the Spirit leads, some of them, the Spirit is not really leading. People just want to do it and spend time. But when the Spirit leads, most of the people there will also know.
Will also know. And nobody
The
will be in a hurry.
atmosphere, people will know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you so much. It's been quite an interesting program so far. It's been an intriguing one. I want to say thank you to our father, our dear daddy, the International Director of Greater Evangelism World Crusade, Pastor Isaac V. Olori. Thank you so much, Daddy, for availing yourself, giving us the opportunity to have you on the show again today. And of course, this time around, I'm sure that we're back to stay by the grace of God. There will be no more pandemic, so the show continues. Thank you so much, Daddy. So thank you too. I would not stop thanking you guys for being a part of the show. Every one of you who has hooked up, you know, via social media. And do not forget that this show will be rebroadcasted on CUTV, that's Caught Up Television. So you will actually have a time to watch this program on TV for those of you who might have missed certain segments of the show. Well, we will see you again next month, because this happens to be a monthly program. So we'll see you again next month. And of course, we'll come with another interesting topic, just to make sure that biblically, our Father will be helping us, you know, on those advice, fatherly advice. Because besides being our Father as a man of God, he has also had quite a lot of biblical experiences, and of course as a man as well, which will guide us as youths. This program is targeted to the youths. Let me remind you, that's why most times we usually get to mention the youths a lot. It's an interactive session, and do not forget to be a part of the question asking segment of the show. And do not also forget to send in your contributions. We'll keep giving you our contacts, and of course we'll create a social media platform where you can reach us even when the show is offline. Thank you so much for today. We remain grateful. My name is Itode Aaron. I'll see you next time on the show. Stay tuned.
And set away. We need grace, grace. lift your hands wherever you are and say, we need grace.